On February 20th, 2025, the United States government did something it had never done to a Mexican drug cartel before. It designated the CJNG a foreign terrorist organization, the same legal category reserved for groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. This wasn't just a political statement, it was a declaration that the CJNG's secret networks had already dug so deep into American soil that the government had no choice but to treat them like a terrorist army operating from within. And if you think that's an exaggeration, buckle up. Because what these people are doing right now, inside the United States and across the entire globe, is how CJNG members continue to terrorize USA and their secret network. Let's get into it. Before we go any further, let's get one thing straight. If you've never heard of the CJNG, you need to understand exactly what kind of organization we're talking about, because this is not just another cartel. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel, known in Mexico as the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, is arguably the most dangerous criminal organization operating on the planet right now. Led for years by one man, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known to the world as El Mencho, the CJNG rose from a footnote in the Mexican underworld to become a global empire that generates billions of dollars every single year. And if you want to know just how feared this man was, the DEA had a $15 million bounty on his head. $15 million. That tells you everything. El Mencho built something that goes beyond a typical cartel. He built a franchise, a system. And that system has arms that reach all the way into the streets of American cities, the ports of Europe, and the networks of Asia. So when we talk about the CJNG terrorizing the USA from the inside, we are not talking about a distant threat sitting on the other side of the border. We are talking about an organization that is embedded, right now, in nearly every single state in this country. And if this kind of deep dive into the world of organized crime is your thing, hit that like button right now, because we're just getting started. Now let's talk about where this operation actually began, and how El Mencho became the man powerful enough to build all of it. Born on July 17, 1966, into a farming family in the Mexican state of Jalisco, Nemesio Cervantes grew up with 6 siblings and very little else. But from an early age, it was obvious he wasn't going to stay in the fields. He diverged early, doing menial work for larger criminal operations by the time he was a teenager, eventually crossing into the United States, where he continued running criminal errands until a Texas-based gang-related conviction got him deported back to Mexico. Upon his return, he joined the Millennial Cartel as an assassin. But when that group fractured, he allied with the Sinaloa Cartel subgroup under Ignacio Nacho Coronel, managing drug operations and violence across Colima and Jalisco. And when Coronel was killed in 2010, El Mencho didn't mourn. He moved. He took control of half the organization, renamed it the Cartel de Jalisco Nueva Generación, and within just a few years, this man had transformed a mid-level drug operation into one of the globe's most violent and sophisticated criminal enterprises. The CJNG doesn't operate like the old-school cartels. They are militarized. They carry military-grade weapons. They have launched rocket attacks on Mexican military helicopters. They have deployed drones with explosives. They don't just run drugs. They extort, kidnap, smuggle migrants, steal crude oil from government pipelines, and have even run elaborate timeshare fraud operations that reportedly raked in over $300 million from American victims alone. These guys are diversified. And that diversification is exactly what makes them so dangerous inside the United States. Comment what you think about the fact that the CJNG graduated from a drug cartel to an organization running timeshare scams on American citizens. Do you think most people in the US have any idea how deep this organization is actually operating in their own country? Now let's get into what you came here for. The secret network operating inside the United States right now. The CJNG's presence in America is not something you can point to on a single map. It's not headquartered in one city. It doesn't have one single operation. It is diffuse, decentralized, and deliberately designed to be impossible to cut the head off of. According to the DEA, CJNG maintains active drug distribution cells in nearly all 50 United States. Not some states, not border states. Nearly all 50. They flood American communities with fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin through a vast web of associates, facilitators, and local affiliate groups who do the street-level work, while CJNG remains in the background pulling the strings. The way the CJNG structures its U.S. operations is actually genius, as disturbing as it is to say that. Rather than sending cartel soldiers directly into American cities in large numbers where they'd be more visible and more vulnerable to law enforcement, the CJNG uses what essentially amounts to a franchise model. They align with existing local criminal groups, supply them with product and weapons, take their cut of the profits, and maintain control through financial leverage and the ever-present threat of violence. The local affiliates take the legal risk. CJNG takes the money, and because these cells are semi-autonomous, meaning they can operate independently without constant direction from the top. Even when law enforcement arrests one cell, the network doesn't collapse. It regenerates. Let's talk about what law enforcement has actually seized from these networks, because the numbers are genuinely staggering. In 2023, the DEA launched a massive operation targeting CJNG associates across the United States. The operation resulted in over 600 arrests and the seizure of roughly $20 million in cash and approximately 15,000 kilograms of methamphetamine. 15,000 kilos. That's not a shipment. That is a supply chain, and that was just one operation in 1 year targeting one cartel. But that wasn't even the biggest hit. In September of 2025, the DEA launched another surge specifically targeting CJNG's networks, this time resulting in 670 arrests spanning 23 DEA field divisions across the country and 7 foreign regions simultaneously. What they pulled off the streets in that one operation included 92 kilograms of fentanyl powder, over 1,100,000 counterfeit pills, more than 6,000 kilograms of methamphetamine, nearly 23,000 kilograms of cocaine, 33 kilograms of heroin, 244 firearms, and approximately $30 million in cash and assets. And I want you to stop and sit with those numbers for a second, because every single gram of fentanyl in that list is a pill that could have killed an American. Look, I want to take a moment here and be honest with you. I know we're covering this because it's an insane story, and it is. But behind every one of those seizure numbers is a neighborhood, a family, a kid who got a pill that didn't have a label on it. The CJNG's fentanyl operation has contributed to one of the worst drug crises this country has ever seen. And while the overdose death numbers have started to come down slightly, dropping from around 113,000 between 2022 and 2023 to roughly 94,000 the following year, those are still 94,000 American lives lost in a single year. That's not abstract, that's real people. Subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date on exactly how organizations like the CJNG continue to operate and how close to home these threats actually are. Because trust me, we're going to keep covering this. Now here is what makes the CJNG's American operation even more alarming. And it has to do with the money side of things, because the drugs are just one piece. The CJNG funds and launders its billions through a variety of sophisticated mechanisms that make it nearly impossible to just follow the money. Their financial arm, a network closely associated with a family group known as Los Quines, handles money laundering operations that route cartel profits through Chinese financial networks, cryptocurrency transactions, bulk cash smuggling across the border, and legitimate front businesses. In January 2025, the U.S. Treasury specifically sanctioned CJNG-linked entities connected to fuel theft and crude oil smuggling operations. Because yes, these people are literally stealing oil from the Mexican government and using those hundreds of millions of dollars to fund their narcotics trade in the United States. And then there's the timeshare fraud. This one genuinely made me stop and think for a second. The CJNG has been linked to sophisticated fraud rings that targeted American and Canadian tourists, people who had bought timeshares in Mexican beach resorts, convincing them they could sell their timeshares back for huge profits, then extracting hundreds of thousands of dollars per victim through fraudulent fees. That operation alone generated an estimated $300 million directly from American pockets, flowing right back into the cartel's war chest. Comment what you think about the idea that a cartel best known for beheadings and rocket launchers was also running elaborate phone scams against American tourists in vacation resorts. Because honestly, the range of what these people are willing to do is something else entirely. Now let's zoom out, because the CJNG is not just a Mexico and USA problem. This organization has gone genuinely global. and the scale of their international footprint is something most people have absolutely no idea about. In the Americas outside of Mexico, the CJNG has established alliances with major criminal organizations in Colombia, sourcing cocaine directly from groups like the Uribeños to fuel their supply chain. They've pushed into Central America, with operations in Guatemala facilitated by proxy groups, and they maintain networks across Peru and Bolivia, the primary cocaine-producing countries in the world. Essentially, the CJNG has positioned itself as the middle link in an intercontinental drug supply chain that goes from South American coca fields through Central America, across Mexico, and directly into the United States. But Europe is where things get particularly eye-opening. According to researchers at the Brookings Institution, the CJNG has had a presence in Europe since approximately 2016, and its footprint there has only grown. Their European operations touch the Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, Portugal, Italy, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, Ireland, Serbia, Albania, Romania, Slovakia, and more. They are competing directly with the Sinaloa cartel for control of European cocaine markets, which are some of the most lucrative drug markets in the world. Ports like Rotterdam in the Netherlands and ports along Spain's coast have been flagged as major entry points for CJNG-linked cocaine shipments. There have even been reports of CJNG-linked networks attempting to establish methamphetamine production capabilities on European soil. And then there's Asia, and specifically China. Now the relationship between the CJNG and China isn't what you might expect. It's not a political alliance. It's a business relationship built on chemistry. The CJNG sources the precursor chemicals needed to manufacture fentanyl and methamphetamine primarily through Chinese suppliers, with those chemicals flowing into Mexico through major seaports like Manzanillo, Lázaro Cárdenas, and Veracruz. Without that chemical supply chain from Asia, the CJNG's entire fentanyl manufacturing operation would be crippled overnight. This is why American officials have pushed so hard for action on Chinese chemical exports, because the pipeline from Chinese labs to Mexican cartel facilities to American streets is one of the most consequential supply chains in the history of the drug trade. The CJNG also has a presence in Australia, has been linked to cocaine transshipment routes through West Africa, and has been flagged by researchers as potentially eyeing future expansion into Middle Eastern markets. This is a truly global criminal enterprise, and at its peak under El Mencho, it operated in more than 40 countries. Now here is where we hit the biggest development in this entire story. And if you haven't heard about this, you need to know. On February 22, 2026, Mexican Special Forces, operating with direct U.S. intelligence support, conducted a raid on a remote hideout in Tapalpa, Jalisco. Their target was El Mencho himself. The operation, which was initially intended as a capture mission, resulted in El Mencho sustaining wounds during the raid. He died while being transported. Along with him, several other senior CJNG commanders were killed or captured, and the forces seized a cache of weapons that included rocket launchers. A reminder, right up until the very end, of what kind of organization this man ran. The CJNG's retaliation was immediate and coordinated. Within hours, cartel forces launched attacks across more than 20 Mexican states, over 250 roadblocks, burned vehicles, ambushes on National Guard convoys, and a direct attack on Guadalajara's airport. At least 25 National Guard soldiers were killed in Jalisco alone. That is the CJNG's answer to losing their leader. Not surrender, not negotiation, organized military-scale retaliation. And here's the question that matters most right now. Does El Mencho's death mean the CJNG's network inside the United States collapses? The honest answer, according to every expert who has weighed in on this, is no. Because of the franchise model, because of the decentralized cell structure, because the CJNG was never built to depend on one man the way some cartels are. Multiple regional commanders, figures like El Jardinero and LRR, already control separate trafficking corridors into the United States. These men didn't disappear when El Mencho died. They had already been operating their portions of the network independently. What El Mencho's death more likely triggers is a violent internal fragmentation, factions of the CJNG fighting each other for control of the most valuable plazas and corridors, while the American drug supply continues largely uninterrupted. Comment what you think about El Mencho's death and whether you believe it will actually make a dent in the CJNG's operations inside the United States. Because I'm genuinely curious where people stand on this, and there's no wrong answer here. There's something I want you to understand before we wrap this up, and I think it's important. When we talk about these operations, the DEA raids, the seizure numbers, the global franchises, the cartel cells in 50 states, it's easy to look at it all as some kind of abstract geopolitical chess match happening far away from real life. But those 113,000 overdose deaths in a single year, many of them directly connected to CJNG fentanyl. Those were somebody's brother, somebody's mom, somebody's best friend. The communities hit hardest by cartel drug distribution aren't just statistics in a DEA report. People are living inside the real consequences of what these networks do every single day. That context matters, and I think it's worth saying out loud. Like this video if this is the kind of deep dive content you want to see more of, because we're just getting started on the CJNG's story, and there is a whole lot more to cover. What we know for certain is this: the CJNG built something that has outlasted the man who built it. Cells are active across nearly all 50 American states. Money is moving through Chinese networks and cryptocurrency. Fentanyl is coming through ports that are thousands of miles apart. And even with El Mencho gone, the franchise keeps running because that's exactly how he designed it. The United States government calling them a foreign terrorist organization wasn't an overreaction. It was a frank acknowledgement of a truth that law enforcement has known for years: that the CJNG stopped being just a cartel a long time ago. They became a shadow institution, one with global reach, military capabilities, and an American network that is still very much operational today. Click another box on your screen to watch another video covering more stories like this.